Hey guys, and welcome to the Train Right podcast. Today we have a repeat guest, Will Benitez. Hey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Hillary. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah. Um, last time, so Will, you're a nutritionist. On Pace Wellness is your nutrition
Yep.
company, and performance nutritionist, sports nutritionist. But I think that your advice is like applicable for anyone. And the last episode, I encouraged listeners to go back and listen to this one. It was super awesome talking about kind of what nutrition looks like in periods of rest or injury or kind of off-season maintenance. But I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about what training looks like and what nutrition looks like when training is super hard and you're preparing for those goal races. You're trying to get that every last drop out of yourself. So yeah, Will, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when we're talking about training and talk about switching gears, yeah, you're right. Last episode was about, just things are calm, right? What do you do when the body is calming down from all the training and whether it's forced to calm down or you're, intentionally calming down. And now here we are talking about, when training is back to normal or when, you're in the tip-top shape and getting ready for that key event. What does your nutrition look like at that point? So obviously very different. Um, but yeah, so I'm excited to talk about pre-workout and post-workout nutrition. I also, Hillary, if I get the green light from you, wanted to throw in maybe towards the end there tips around like alcohol consumption and overall water or hydration. Um,
Yeah, I think that's important. Obviously I drink water. Everyone should drink probably drink water. But, I think it's centered around our culture of running and especially ultra running. Like the post race, beer and barbecue, and half of the trail runs, end at a pub or something like this. So I think it's a really important to talk about, topic to talk about. So yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Okay, great.
I
So we
guess
got the green light.
I'll let you. Yeah, you got it. But yeah, so okay, so then how do we start? I guess we can start by talking about, so when you're in a good when you're ramping up the miles, ramping up the high intensity workouts, what how should your nutrition change and what are some recommendations that you have for athletes if they're, in the full swing of training?
Sure, sure. So obviously, if you're getting up there in the mileage, getting up there in maybe the intensity, your nutrition needs to match that, right? So your nutrition should be kind of going along with the progress of your training. And when you're at that point where volume and or intensity is, getting up there, then your nutrition needs to be also getting up there, right? So, yes, I'm talking about caloric intake, but also just the quality of your nutrition. So, sticking with calories for a second, I hesitate to throw a number out there because I don't know who is listening, right? It very much depends on the person, whether their type of activity, what that level up of intensity or volume looks like for them, their size, right? Their height, their weight. It just depends on so much what that number of calorie increase looks like. But regardless, there should be an increase. The body is expending so much more energy to get them through this tougher block of training that they need to match that with energy input. And so when I talk about energy input, I mean calories, right? Calories just energy. And so if you're demanding more of your body, therefore you're outputting more energy for your workouts, for your other maybe recovery exercises that you're doing, then your input needs to match that in order to properly recover from that training, properly refuel for the next workout, and just overall function, right? The body just needs to be able to function normally. So if you are kind of in this state where you are doing all this output, right, all this training, extra training, and not getting in enough calories, then already you're not optimizing recovery because you're not getting the energy you need for recovery. You are, if it goes on, if it persists, you are putting yourself more of an injury risk. So obviously, no runner wants that. And then
Mm-mm.
also you're suppressing your immune system, so if you don't have, if your body doesn't have the energy it needs to just function normally, your immune system gets suppressed. Already post workout, post training, we are somewhat immune suppressed for a little bit of time, so we're more susceptible to, getting sick, and bacteria coming into our system and us not being able to fight it off. Um, so if we couple that with not getting enough calories or energy back into the system, then we just become even more immune suppressed and even more susceptible to getting sick, and getting those colds that we don't want. So often, I work with endurance athletes, and whether it's like just before the time of marathon event or a half marathon or something like that, they get sick. It's like it's very common for them to get sick. And what I think it is that, that's kind of around taper period. And so a lot of runners will just kind of back off the calories because they might not be doing as much, and maybe they just did it too much, right? Maybe they just backed off the calories. They reduced the calories too much, and now they're kind of immune suppressed and very susceptible to those colds. It's a very common trend, I think, with endurance runners.
Yeah, I've noticed that too with the athletes that I coach. It's like, when they're tapering that down, it's like right before the marathon or like their event, they can be susceptible to that. And I did have a question though. So, I mean, it's aside for getting, OCD about the amount of, if we're dealing with a strict number, like calories getting in, like
Hmm.
how can you pick up on just like I'm a big proponent of listening to your body and listening to the cues that your body is telling you. What's something that athletes could use to pick up on something if they're not actually optimizing their recovery post workout, like, and they need to make some changes to their nutrition.
Yeah, sure. So, and Hillary, I'm right there with you. I'm a big proponent of that too, and that it really helps. One, to not overeat or to not undereat. But here's the thing: is like as long as they are good, and I don't mean like good like they've really worked at the skill good. Um, but some people really struggle with listening to their body cues, and whether that is that their body isn't really um, uh, I don't want to say good again, but their body's really not giving them those cues. That's possible,
Yeah.
right? So if you go so long kind of without listening to the body, or maybe your nutrition or just your lifestyle is so busy and stressed that your body isn't really set up for success in terms of giving you proper hunger cues and satiation cues, then that's a little bit tricky for you, right? And so you can get back to that optimal area to be in, but it might take some work. So some people can be like you, maybe Hillary, can be really good at just listening to the hunger cues, listening to when your body's telling you that you're full. Um, but other people need to get back to that point, right? Because I think that at some point we were there, right? Kids often are there. Um, they eat because their body's growing, but they tend to not overeat unless they're being fueled or getting the wrong input from their parents or caretakers or something like that. But we lose it, right? We lose that skill somewhere along the way. So I do think we can get back there, but it involves certain things like slowing down, right? Eating
Mhm.
slowly, not going after seconds, so quickly. Maybe give your body like 10 to 20 minutes to really realize that you just consumed food, and let you or let it tell you if it needs more food, and then going for a second maybe, right? And then controlling that portion size a little bit. So there's ways to kind of get back to that more intuitive or mindful eating place. But in
Mhm.
addition to that, I think this is going to your question directly, is what else can runners do to really check in there? I think there are a few areas that you, as a runner, can kind of think about it when you're in this mode. One is, um, think about if you experience that kind of ravenous hunger around um, post workout or the day after a hard workout or key event, or hard training event. That's pretty common for people to on the day after a hard training session, or double day or something like that, for people's metabolism to just be like really quick, right? People just constantly hungry. Um, Listen to that, right? Because not only is it
Mhm.
telling you, okay, yeah, you might need more calories that day because your body is clearly, in this hyper recovery state. Um, but what does that tell you about the day before, right? Maybe you didn't eat enough, or maybe you didn't eat enough of this of certain nutrients the day before,
Mhm.
where your body is kind of over signaling. It's overactive that next day. Because yes, it's common, but it doesn't have to be normal, right? That what we want to do is actually have you refueling properly on that day of that hard workout or double day or whatever it is, so that the next day is kind of a more normal day and not this like super ravenous, I'm eating all the time kind of day.
Mhm.
Um, some other things that you could pay attention to are thirst, thirst, and your urination output. So if you find yourself like either really thirsty, or you're not peeing enough, that can tell you a little bit more about your whether you're getting in the right amount of calories or right amount of food and quality of food, right? Because food is also hydrating. So it's not just from water intake that we get hydration, but we also get it from the foods that we eat, especially plant foods, right? Vegetables and fruits are especially
Mhm.
hydrating. So if you're drinking enough water, or you're really not drinking that much water, where you shouldn't be having thirst issues, or you shouldn't be not peeing as regularly as you are, then maybe it's food, right? Maybe the quality of your food, maybe the quality of, or the quantity, sorry, of your plant-based foods isn't as high as it normally is or should be. And so we
Mhm.
can think about, getting your fruit and vegetable intake back up, as a result of that cue, right? But again, it's paying attention to what your body is actually telling you. And that's like a skill in and of itself, and something that we should be making time for, as much as
Yeah.
possible. Because when we listen to what the body is trying to communicate to us, and kind of think critically about what we're noticing, we can often either ask the right questions, or just kind of work at trying to answer those questions, or what the body's trying to tell us, and oftentimes we'll find some kind of solution there, but it really
Yeah.
starts with that listening piece.
Yeah, I like that, and you're right, it is something that we have to practice, and I think sometimes it's like, yeah, like, ugh, it's hard sometimes during my, like, high training points, it's like, "Oh, I feel like I'm hungry all the time," so it's, yeah, it's good to kind of reconnect with that stuff and like, "Okay, let's take a minute."
Hmm.
But yeah, thanks for answering that question.
Oh yeah.
Going back to kind of what you were saying about, yeah, I mean, did you finish everything about the recovery portion of, how to fuel after, like, these big workouts?
Oh, I mean, no, I might have even missed that piece. I don't think I even got started on how to refuel after these big work.
I didn't think so. So let's
Yeah.
go back to that.
Okay, so essentially now we're talking about recovery, right? We're talking about recovering after these hard sessions. So yeah, I might have just talked on, listening to your body. How do you know if you're doing it? But here's the how to do it in a way, or like what to do exactly. So post workout, post training recovery is, there's a lot to it, right? There's a lot out there from an industry perspective, right? There's a lot of companies and products out there that just market right to that, post workout. So you're talking about, protein powders, or collagen, or other kind of endurance products, that are really, speaking to post workout recovery. Um, there's something to some of those products, but what we want to make sure that we're doing right off the bat is make sure that our nutrition timing is proper, right? So I'll get to the products, and kind of what I think about some of those in a second. But if the one thing that we can do, if we're eating, let's say, a meal or a snack, let's make sure that we are doing it in the proper timing after the training session is over. I think if there's one key way to, not ensure necessarily, but help with post workout recovery, it's getting some amount of calories, and hopefully they're quality calories, in
Yeah.
after your workout, right? So what I'm talking about is ideally within 30 minutes of a workout. If it's within 1 hour, that's okay, right? But if you can get it in within 30 minutes, and that's probably best. I know some people can't really tolerate foods, right after a hard session or a hard training day, um,
Mm.
and they might need that extra bit of time. But hopefully within an hour, those people are okay with consuming some kind of caloric intake. So I do like within 30 minutes though. I think the body is primed, the muscles are primed to kind of uptake that glucose from the carbohydrates of the foods that you should be eating within that amount of time, right? Like within that hour, and it's even better within that 30 minutes. So, let's take advantage of that, right? Let's take advantage of the body's natural response to post-workout, where it wants to kind of bring back the glucose and bring back the nutrients that it needs to get recovery going already. After about an hour, research has shown that that window kind of calms down a bit and the body slows down that uptake, but it comes back. It kind of cycles again, and about 2 to 3, some research says 4 hours after training, that kind of second window of recovery opportunity opens up again. Um, and so, you want to make sure that's typically like, maybe that next meal time, right? So like within that hour might just be a good, healthy snack. Maybe it's breakfast for some people, and then that like 3 to 4 hours after is maybe that next meal, right? So again, making sure that that next meal or next snack, whatever it is at that time for you, is also quality food, right? That means, you're not going after the greasy pizza, the greasy burgers in that 3 to 4 hour window, because that might not be giving your body the best quality clean food that it wants to recover during that second window. Right, so there's all this
Mhm.
nutrition timing. I know Hillary, in our last episode, we talked about I think it was strategically placed carbs or something like that. And
Um,
in that same light, or in that same vein, it's like, making sure that we are being strategic with the timing of our overall nutrition, not just necessarily our carbs, although that is definitely a big part of this. But you're really optimizing that kind of, that window or windows of recovery post workout. So again, within an hour, if you can do it within 30 minutes, and then also making sure that that following meal, anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, it really depends on the person. You're eating as clean and as wholesome as possible, because your body's using those nutrients. Um, so if you are for example, and we'll talk about alcohol and maybe later, but if you are an evening um, person, you work out in the evenings, maybe after work, um, that means that maybe you are foregoing that alcohol, whatever it is. If it's beer, wine, you name it, you may be foregoing that, because no matter what, if you're working out in the evening, I imagine within 4 hours, you're probably going to be getting to bed. Um, and that means that you're going to be having the alcohol consumption within that time frame, and I really don't think that that's going to be the best bet for you in terms of optimizing your recovery. So as
Mhm.
tempting as that cold beer might be for you, maybe save it for the days where you don't work out, in the evening, and maybe that's just the weekends for you. But again, if you're trying to optimize recovery, that might just be a decision that you have to make, and it's really up to you, obviously. Um, so there's nutrition timing, right? I think I just
Yeah.
kind of like made that very clear. But then there's
Right.
also like specific um, nutrients, right? So obviously you have your three macronutrients: carbs, protein, and fats. Within post-workout windows, we want to be making sure that we're getting enough carbohydrate and protein. Obviously, most people know about protein, right? Again, the industry, sports nutrition industry, the protein powder industry, they've made it very clear um, that protein is very, very important. I think they've made it maybe over clear, or maybe they're pushing protein a little bit too hard. Because I actually think that we should be doing more carbs, right? So if you've heard of the 4-to-1 ratio with regards to carbohydrate to protein recovery, that's four grams of carbohydrates per 1 gram of protein. So that's making sure that you are getting enough carbohydrates in your post-workout nutrition, um, not just focusing on protein powder, right? So if you're just mixing protein powder with water, calling it a day, if you have no carbs there, then you are not giving your muscles the recovery that it really wants, and giving your body the refuel that it really needs um, to actually, have the muscle fully recover for the next day's training session. So you don't ignore the carbohydrates, right? And people, some research actually says that there's kind of a synthesis that happens between or when carbohydrates and protein are consumed together. which actually allows for both to be synthesized or processed um, more, more optimally. Um,
Mhm.
so I think there's something to that too, is, just making sure you're not consuming one over the other. Because, if you think about whole foods, you don't get that, right? You don't get a food rarely, unless you're talking about meat. But you rarely get a food that doesn't have carbohydrates and protein, right? It has some degree of both. However, when
Yeah.
we are talking about protein powders, it's synthetic, right? We've manufactured that. And so there are products out there that have zero carbohydrates, and that's just not natural. So the body is probably not set up to only consume protein powders and zero carbohydrates for a reason, right? Because we want both together.
Yeah.
Um, so it really is. I think the nutrition timing piece is really important, but then again, also making sure that you are getting um, carbohydrates in your protein, or sorry, in your post-workout nutrition. And then I didn't talk about fat, and the reason is because we want to keep fat minimal during those windows of recovery. Fat slows down the uptake of carbs, right? So if you think about blood sugar, if you just eat a white potato or a bag of pretzels or something that's also like just really carbohydrate rich, um, and nothing else, then your blood sugar is going to spike, right? It's going to increase, and that's because you're essentially just eating not 100%, but well, the majority of that food is just carbs. And so the body's response to that
Yeah.
is to just increase the blood sugar, obviously. However, when we throw in protein or fat in there, it slows down that process, right? So we kind of know that when we're trying to control blood sugar. But when we're talking about post-workout recovery, we actually don't
Mhm.
want that too much, right? We don't want too much fat in there to slow down that uptake of the carbs, because we actually want that to happen so that the muscles can get that in that prime time, right? In that post-workout window. And so, that kind of I think a common post-workout food is like a banana or some other kind of fruit and peanut butter, right? Or some kind of nut butter. It's like a very common post-workout snack for people. I won't say don't do it. I will say don't have globs of peanut butter in your oatmeal or in your on your banana or whatever other kind of, maybe your toast or something like that. If you're having
Hmm.
avocado toast or something like that, maybe have half of the serving of avocado that you would normally have. So if you would kind of down a whole avocado, within 30 minutes of a workout, maybe consider backing off of that just a little bit and saving that other half for another time. And again, the reason is because it slows down the uptake of carbohydrates. So here's the thing. If you're getting well above a normal amount of carbohydrates, you're eating a big bowl of oatmeal or 2 to 3 slices of toast with the avocado, whatever it is, you're getting enough carbs. You may have to worry about that just a little bit less, again, because you have more carbs, right? You have more carbs that you're supplying, so the body can uptake more. But if we're talking about, one banana to 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, that ratio is a little bit off, right? So we might want to still have that single banana and then maybe back it down to 1 tablespoon of peanut butter. Right. And so if even if you're not a banana and peanut butter person, apply that concept to whatever it is you are eating. Right. Try to identify the carbs, try to identify the fats, and try to think about, okay, am I doing this somewhat right there? Again, because fat slows down that carbohydrate uptake, and that's probably not the very best for recovery. Um, again,
So, and
go
I
ahead.
maybe this is too soon, but I want to like flip that over to like the pre-workout side, like
Yeah.
for like what happened, because I am a banana peanut butter person. Like I love it, even though I'm in France. Like I still find the nut butters.
hmm
But is that something that would work for a pre-workout type thing?
Yeah, sure. So yes, because it's still happening, right? So the fat is still slowing down your body's kind of um, metabolism or processing of those carbs. So depending on what your goal is with your pre-workout nutrition, um, eh, you may want to do that or you may not want to do that. So that also comes down to time. So if you are eating, let's say your pre-workout nutrition, because some people may not be able to tolerate food too closely to their workout. Some people's pre-workout nutrition is, 2, 3 hours before their actual workout. In that case, yes, you want the protein, you want the fat, because you want to slow down that carbohydrate um, uptake or processing, because you want to have that long-term energy so that, 2, 3 hours later, when you're finally going to work out, you still have some energy. You can actually get through that workout. However, if
Yeah.
you're eating, within an hour of your workout, maybe even within 30 minutes, um, then you might not want as much of that fat or protein. And you might just want it to be just carbohydrate, or just, very much carbohydrate. So, maybe it's like a half a tablespoon of the peanut butter to the banana, or maybe 1 tablespoon. And again, it depends on the person, and maybe even what that workout is. But yeah, you do want to think about that. You do want to think about, okay, how close to my workout am I eating? And am I getting the most of the carbs that I'm trying to fuel with? Um, and you might not be if you're just overloading those carbs with fat, right? So again, that is something that you want to think about. But it's hard for me to tell you an exact combination of foods, because it really depends on, as I mentioned, what that workout is. What systems is the body using to get through that workout, but also you, right? Your not just like your age and height and weight and all that kind of stuff, but also like how well your body is at processing those kinds of foods. So Hillary, someone like you who might have been doing this kind of fueling, let's say you were doing that pre-fueling, you were doing the banana, and let's say you were doing 3 tablespoons of peanut butter or some other kind of nut butter, within, let's say, 45 minutes of a workout. I would say most people probably can't get away with that. However, you can train the body to adapt to certain fueling habits, right? So if you've been doing that for years, and you might be able you can better tolerate that kind of nutrition fueling. However, someone just getting into running or getting into long distance running, maybe getting into endurance or mountain running, they may have to go through a period of getting their body used to fueling a certain way, right? As you probably had to do early on in your career. You may not have realized it, but the body realized it, right? The body did have to adapt to your transition into that kind of training at some point. Um, so, any kind of nutrition fueling, I do think, can be adapted to. However, it does take some time to do that. And if you're not willing to do that, then just do things right off the bat, right? So maybe again, work at, minimizing the fat consumption too close before that workout session. Oh, and then actually another thing, I have some clients, Hillary, um, that and you may have athletes that have dealt with this too, where they just can't seem to, or they're having digestive issues, during their runs. And I'll learn, and then maybe there's some other things going on, whether it's side stitches or just some other kind of issue that's happening during their run. What I do is I take a look at their pre-workout nutrition, and if I see that they're either eating too close to their workout, or they're eating so too close to a workout, that's one. Second is too close and too much, right? Too much food close to the workout. And then third, I look at how much fat is in their pre-workout nutrition. So I'll look at those three things to determine, and we'll play around with it. We'll experiment on their runs, um, to determine if any of those issues is actually causing the digestive issues, or maybe they're kind of running out of energy way too soon for what they should be doing. Um, we'll look at those 3 areas to kind of figure out, what the cause is of the problem. And often I find that, yeah, too much fat, pre-workout, or maybe too much food pre-workout, too close to that workout session, um, is actually not great. It's not giving the body enough time to digest, uh, you're gonna experience some digestive issues during the run if you ask your body to do that.
I remember actually one of the first times that I was running. This was in high school, and it was actually I wasn't a runner. I was more of a tennis player, and like they made us run for conditioning. But I was like
Mhm.
on the country team for fun, for training for tennis. And I remember it was Friday, we had our meets, like our cross country meets. But Friday was also the time when like everyone, would go out to lunch, like off campus. And I remember I was like a cool kid. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go with the seniors. I'm gonna go get Big City Burrito, which is like this crazy thing in Fort Collins, Colorado. I hope that there's someone listening from Fort Collins, Colorado, because they've got to know this. We had this like hefty burrito at like, like even it was like I think at 12 p.m., but then the cross country meet was at like 3:30. And
Oh
at that
gosh.
time I the worst side stitch of my life. Like, I will never do that again.
Yeah, yeah, you learn quick when you do something like that.
Yeah, so it was either too much fat or too much food or probably both,
Or
but it was very uncomfortable.
exactly, right, or probably both. Yeah, because 'cause you're talking about I don't know if there was, like, guacamole in there or maybe some sour cream or, obviously just the food has, cooked with oil and everything. So, yeah, you again, probably both there.
Oh, man. Yeah, that was an uncomfortable experience. So, yeah, so that matters. Like, I mean, I think these are just, like this are a ton of, like, good, like, tips that people can even, like, analyze in their diets themselves,
Oh,
and
sure,
then
yeah.
if they need guidance, obviously, they can call you up and talk to you if they wanna learn more about it, but I think this is really good information to kind of, like, do a trial run on, your own nutrition to see how you're measuring up.
Yeah, yeah, it does. I mean, I think it's I hope that these tips are taken that way and that I encourage the people who are listening to do this on their own, right? Like actually maybe measure out like their nut butter or think about like, oh, how much avocado am I actually using? Download an app or get online and try to figure out like, okay, how much fat is half an avocado? How much fat is in 3 tablespoons of peanut butter, or in the tablespoon whatever amount that you're using, and just try to figure out like, okay, yeah, that's way too much fat. Let me reduce that and let's see if that helps more. And if so, hey, you're onto something. Keep that up, and hopefully that's your new normal at some point. But I definitely encourage people to try these tips out on their own because I do think that there's something to just like educating yourself, which is probably what people are doing on this podcast, and then actually going and doing it and experimenting, um, rather than just kind of like looking for answers and not doing anything about it. Right? Go and experiment, and that's where you learn the most is when you actually apply these things to your own body. Again, because it's different for everybody. So that's why I don't want to. I'm hesitant to throw out exact numbers and things like that because it very much depends on each person.
Yeah. And I love that. I mean, I'm a proponent of science, and we're our own, since we don't do enough human studies and they're hard enough to publish. We
Right,
might as well
right.
be our own and try to figure out our own N of one.
Exactly, exactly. I love that.
At least that's my proponent. Sign your own health disclaimer there.
Sure, sure.
Um, Yeah, so yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, I was just asking these questions because they're interesting to me, and I wasn't sure if you had any more tips for pre-workout, like getting the best out of your workout. I know it's like a combination of timing and ratios of carbs to fats and that kind of stuff. It's from my experience as an athlete. Like, yeah, sure, I can train myself, but it's about learning, but then also adaptability. Like, I can also certainly kind of optimize mine.
Mhm. Right, right.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, as far as like, are there other tips? I mean, sure, right? We can get into the nitty-gritty of because those were like big tips, right? Like obvious ones, but even ones that maybe people aren't paying attention to or doing right. But then you have like
Yeah.
other little tips for people that can, maybe if they are having digestive issues, they can't tolerate that food, whole foods that close, and so maybe they have to do more liquid nutrition, right? So maybe you can rely on kind of endurance supplement products, which have carbohydrates in those for the most part, mixed into your water or something like that, as your pre-workout nutrition. Again, because you maybe can't tolerate whole foods too close to your workout. So there's that tip for some people who are having digestive issues. Um, there are the people who want to explore fasting, doing workouts fasted, doing runs fasted. In which case, you're not having pre-workout nutrition, right? You are either, if you're doing your workouts or runs in the morning, um, then you're not eating breakfast, right? You're maybe having some water, maybe you're having black coffee with nothing in it, but for the most part, you're not having any calories in before that workout. Um, so there's tips around that, or just making sure that you're doing that properly. Because some people I've seen it, "Oh, I'm trying to do my workouts fasted and have pretty much no calories coming in." And I asked them about their morning, and they tell me about maybe the protein powder or the coffee with milk and sugar, and I'm like, oh well, maybe that's not actually doing it right. um, What else is there for pre-workout nutrition? Well, hydration, and we're actually going to talk about that. I'll get into
Yeah,
that a little bit, but that's like a big
yeah, we
one, right? Is making sure that you are just properly hydrated before you get into your workout. That's huge.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
if you can do everything you want right food wise, but if you're going into that workout dehydrated, good luck, right? 'Cause you're just not that food is not going to compensate for making sure that you're well hydrated for your workout.
yeah. And I think that that even differs in, I mean, at least I've noticed too, and it's something I have to stay on top of in more humid climates because I feel like I'll just like, even if it's cold, I'll be sweating way more than I sweat normally, like in a drier climate, like in Colorado. So I'll notice that, like, and I've noticed this with different athletes that I coach, like if they've trained, if they're, their first summer run or like their first hot run, they'll notice that their energy is just zapped. And I'm just like, my first question is, okay, well, did you drink enough water? And then they can
Right.
like, oh, like I didn't know about that. I was like, yeah, well, like, I mean, it can, I mean, and I've learned that the hard way from then. The reason why I asked that question is because I've experienced it. And I'm
Because you
like,
know, yeah.
why is my energy zapped? And it's because, yeah, your body is working really hard and like, and basically, you're squeezing out all your water.
Mm-hmm. Think about this, Hillary. When you're thirsty, when your body is telling you, giving you that thirst cue, you are already, I think the number is like 1 to 2% or somewhere around there, dehydrated. And that might sound really low, right? But that is actually like very significant in terms of hydration. Um, so think about that, like when you're thirsty. So some runners, they go into their workout or their run. Maybe they didn't drink any water, barely any water, within, let's say, an hour or even 20 minutes of their run. And I can talk about that in a little bit. Um, and then they run, right? They're going on the run. Maybe they don't drink, they have a bottle of water with them, but maybe they're not touching it for like another half hour, or, maybe they don't touch it for till mile 5 or something like that. They're trying to space out their water consumption. They're,
Yeah.
they drink. Let's say that they get to mile 5 or they get to 30 minutes, like, wow, I'm so thirsty. They start guzzling down their water. They're already their body's already too late to the hydration game, right? They're too late. They already dehydrated their body to the point where now they have to guzzle down water to replenish their hydration. And you can't match it, right? You can never get back to that hydrated state if you are continuing to work out and drink water. Does that make sense? So you can't, if
Yeah.
you are trying to compensate for not drinking enough water beforehand. You're drinking your 20-ounce bottle in that run, in that long run, to stay hydrated. You can't get to the point of hydration, of optimal hydration. You will only kind of mitigate the effects of dehydration, right? Because the
Yeah.
body's rate of essentially it dehydrating or sweating is much faster than that water coming in, right? Than your input of that water coming in. So what that tells us is that we want to make sure that we are going into our workouts and our runs as hydrated as possible. Again, because we can't play catch up, right? Think of it in your ultra running. You can't play catch up in terms of calories, right? If you are in a
No.
100K plus event, you will never be able to match the demand of the body, what the body is burning essentially calorically, with what you can actually put in. It's just impossible. You can't match it. Same thing applies to
Yeah.
water. So what we want to, or hydration, what we want to do is make sure that we are hydrating properly beforehand. And I don't mean just in the hour before, but just like essentially all the time, right? But yes, even within
Yeah.
that hour before. Um, because oftentimes, people don't want to drink water because they're going to have to stop and pee during the run, or because they don't want that the feeling of the water inside them when they're going on a run. So those are very
Mhm.
real things. I totally get it, but it's not worth, not getting the most out of your workout or out of your run if you are going into it dehydrated, because what that is doing is it's potentially sapping your energy, like you kind of alluded to in your story, where you just aren't going to get through that workout as best as you can. You're going to slow down. You might have to stop early. Um, or I should say, you are just putting more recovery demand on your body, because you just kind of worked it out past what that workout was supposed to do. So let's say your coach threw a plan at you. The coach knows what that workout's supposed to do to your body and how you should recover from it. But if you try to do that in a pretty dehydrated state. Now you have to recover so much more because you just worked out your body way more than the coach was trying to work out your body, right? So let's
Mm,
not put that extra stress on us, and let's go into these workouts and these runs properly hydrated. Um, so when it comes to kind of, pre-workout hydration, what I often recommend is, within that hour of running, let's say you're going to work out or run at 10 a.m., between 9 and 10, you're getting in at least 20 ounces of water. Um, for that run, even if it's not hot out, even if it's a 40-minute run, it's not an hour and a half minute run, it doesn't matter. Start building those habits, right? Get into that state and that routine of properly hydrating before your runs or before your gym sessions, especially your gym sessions, right? You just sweat so much in the gym. Go into those workouts properly hydrated from the get-go. um
yeah.
and then, as I mentioned before, it's like all the time too, right? Like just make sure you are on top of your hydration. Don't forget about that because the body's when it's not training, it's recovering. That's clear clear and simple, right? If you are not training, then what your body is doing in those other hours of the day, whether it's 22 hours or 20 hours, doesn't matter, in those hours that you're not training, your body's recovering. And so you
Yep.
want to make sure that you are staying as hydrated as possible so that your body can continue to recover as much as possible and as optimally as possible.
Yeah. Well, and then speaking about recovery, I know you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but where does alcohol come into this balance?
Yeah, so alcohol consumption, for I don't want to say for everyone, but for many, especially many of our adult listeners out there, um, is a real thing, right? It's a social activity. It's maybe we just love that glass of wine at night, love that cold beer. It's getting warmer out there. Maybe we're going to be, depending on the situation that with this whole coronavirus, maybe we'll be getting back to a somewhat state of maybe a new normal this summer. We'll be having those kind of opportunities again to enjoy alcoholic beverages in social settings with friends and coworkers, etc. Right? So
Yeah.
it is a kind of a really perfect time to start thinking about what alcohol does and what that means for our bodies and recovery. Um, so essentially, I'll just throw this out there. Alcohol is doing, I would say, virtually nothing for your recovery and from a performance or athletic standpoint, right? So if you are trying to recover from that hard workout, do not look to alcohol to do that, right? Because it's just not going to do that. Is it going to supply carbohydrates? Yes. Okay, we know that it has carbohydrates. We know it has sugars. Um, is it going to allow your body to properly process those carbohydrates and recover and get those carbohydrates to the muscles and do what those carbs should be doing for the body? No. Alcohol disrupts the proper metabolism of the body. It demands a lot of attention from the body in terms of processing. So when alcohol is consumed, it kind of almost stops other things from happening in the body and requires that the body process alcohol above other things, above other carbs, above other fats, above proteins. And so it's not going to optimize that digestion or metabolic activity, which we want to be optimized as athletes. um, so, you know, do, never drink alcohol? No, I don't think that you should never drink alcohol. Cut it out completely, unless you want to. If you want to do that, by all means, go for it. But if you're trying to wrestle with do I do that? Is that, I really love alcohol. I really love hanging out with friends and having a beer, whatever the case is. Okay, have that, but then think about when you do it or how often you do it, and maybe your answer or your sweet spot is somewhere in that area versus just never having it. So maybe you just make sure that you don't have it post workout, because again, the body's really trying to work to recover soon after working out. Having alcohol after that race, or you know going for a run, showering, and going out for beers with a friend probably is just not the best scenarios for when you have the alcohol consumption happening. um, maybe you save it for other times when it's not post workout, or maybe you save it for the weekends when maybe you get to work out in the morning and the alcohol consumption is kind of in the evenings. um, Or again, maybe you think about the amount, right? So instead of having uh, maybe two plus, servings of alcohol whenever you do have it. Um, cut it down, right? Cut it down to no more than two, or less than two, obviously. And just that reduction of alcohol is going to help, right? You're still having it, so there's something to consider there, but you're having less, and so that does help, and mitigate a little bit there what the three or two plus servings was going to do to your body. Um, Now, I do want to mention, Hillary, that I drink alcohol, right? I don't know if you drink alcohol, but I drink alcohol, and I think that there's something else behind alcohol that needs to be considered. So, we when we think about health, we also maybe think about or hear wellness, right? Health and wellness, it kind of goes hand in hand, but they're two different things, right? I think of health as more physiological, right? More like, is the body doing its, functioning in a healthy state? Everything that it should be doing, it's doing right. I think, and it's not diseased, right? It's not experience dis-ease. It's not experience that extra stress physiologically speaking. I think of that as health. I think of
Mhm,
everything else as wellness. I think of mental there's a mental component to wellness, there's an emotional component to wellness, there's a spiritual component to wellness. I think very much there's a social component of wellness, right? So when we think about alcohol, think about the settings that you're in for the most part, right? So maybe you're having drinks with friends, and you're enjoying a night, hanging out with your best friends. Maybe you're enjoying an evening, happy hour evening with coworkers, and that happens maybe once a month, if not less frequently than that. Um,
mhm.
where you really get to connect with the people that you work with, and you get to share ideas and laugh with people who otherwise you're only working with, maybe you're only experiencing their lives in, under stress, under work stress. um Maybe you're having wine with family, maybe there's a family function happening, or you get together with family once a month or something, and yeah, you bring out the nice wines and you enjoy that company. There is so much of benefits that comes with that setting, that if alcohol is involved there, or if I don't want to say it's necessary, but if it is in a healthy atmosphere, then what we see is the wellness benefits can certainly outweigh the health negatives that might be occurring in those settings, right? So if you are
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoying the time that you are having, and yes, some alcohol is involved in that time, that those benefits that come from those moments in life s- very much outweigh the somewhat negative benefits that is happening metabolically, or sorry, not benefits, negatives that are happening metabolically from the alcohol consumption, right? Because it's improving your mood, it's improving your state of mind. Those social settings and events are improving your motivation and your, I feel good as a personness, right? It's kind of like helping your overall um, commitment to your health and to your athletic pursuit by having those moments in your life. And so, yeah, if alcohol is involved, let it be involved, right? Just enjoy those moments for what they are, and then just moderate consumption elsewhere. But I want to make that clear, because I do think that there's definitely there can be these wellness benefits that come when alcohol may be consumed. That I don't think people need to kind of take themselves out of those social events, those familial events, because they can't drink alcohol, right? So now there's all this extra stress, and now they can't enjoy these times because alcohol can't be consumed. I'd much rather them enjoy the glass of beer and enjoy those times with friends and coworkers and family than not have that glass of beer and not enjoy the time that they should be enjoying. I hope that
Yeah.
makes sense, but I really do think that that is such an important thing, and I really want people to kind of take note of that, um, when thinking about, like, should I get rid of alcohol completely? Again, your choice, but maybe it's just in moderation, and you really have to figure out what's best for you.
And I love that. I think that that's actually one of like when in doubt. I mean, the same goes for like quote unquote unhealthy foods. I think where like athletes can get into this trap. Like about what's bad or what's good or like I think in my opinion I think you can eat everything like mostly from the earth like plants but like you can eat everything in moderation and yeah there you go like just not too much it's okay so but I think you provided some really good tips and I think this is a good place to wrap it up and as always, I want to thank you for your time. I mean, I always learn so much whenever I talk to you, and yeah, I'm so grateful for this opportunity, and I think like it's providing a lot of useful tips for all the athlete listeners if they're looking to to optimize their nutrition, and of course, um, I mean, this is on the other podcast too, and we'll link it in the end, but I'll just kind of wrap it up with if athletes want to get in contact with you more specifically, how might they do that?
So yes, thank you. They can reach out to me. My website is www.onpacewellness.com. They can email me at Wilfredo, Wilfredo, at onpacewellness.com. My number is on my website. It's out there. You can just Google search me or something like that. And my contact info is out there because I want to be as accessible to people as possible. And by all means, as we talked about before, listeners, try this stuff out on your own, right? Try these tips. Use your body as a science experiment, because that's really the only way that we're going to figure it out, right? I tell my clients all the time, this is a process. I don't have the answer right away. I need to make sure that it's the right answer. The only way to make sure of doing that is by having the person try out my recommendations.
Hmm.
So it's all an experiment, it's all a process, and we're just all trying to find, the best way to do things. So go out there. I hope this podcast inspires you to work on some things on your own. If you have other questions, if you want to do more, dive in more, reach out to me, reach out to Hillary. She's a breadth of knowledge as well. Um, and yeah, let's connect that way. But yeah, I hope this excites people to learn more and do more on their own.
Well, it definitely excited me. I'm gonna try out some more things on my own too.
Great, great.
But thanks so much, Will, for joining us. It was always a pleasure.
Thank you, Hillary. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too.